saw that. I saw that.
That's okay. Go ahead. Okay, you saw the earthquake zone.
Yes, it was absolutely fascinating.
It was interesting for us too.
Mhm. I can imagine. I've never felt an earthquake like that, although when there was an earthquake in the late 1980s in Mexico,
Hmm.
no, I think it was in the early 90s, that the big earthquake that they had then, I felt it in San Antonio. I
Oh,
was in
wow.
I was in a class at in the evening and I felt it. I felt that all the way from Mexico.
Wow. I remember the first earthquake I felt. It was in the early 80s. The reason why I remember it so vividly is because we experienced the earthquake. It was upstate New York. It was a couple of days after I watched the movie called Poltergeist. And let me tell you something. Being a youngster, let's see, when Poltergeist came out, I was about maybe 12 or 13. And waking up in the middle of the night, having the house shaking after watching Poltergeist was an experience. I thought we actually had a poltergeist.
We actually had we've had two earthquakes here in Wisconsin. Um, it felt like a truck hit the house. And I had pictures on the wall that came out. It was just one big jolt,
Mm,
and it scared me to death. But
yeah.
but Wisconsin is actually on a fault line, so that extends down through Illinois somewhere.
Oh, wow.
We experience small tremors quite often.
Yeah. That day that Sister Peggy's talking about, I remember Sister Sharon was talking, then she stopped talking and she started looking around. She said, "Is my car shaking?" And as she said it, my house started shaking. I was like, wait a minute. I was about to jump out the window here. That was the day we had, it was a 4.8, I think, in New York. It was the day after they ruled against the minister's his lawsuit. It was 4.8 jumping all over the place that day. Oh well. Has anyone had a chance to go on YouTube to see how we're doing the Zoom meetings now? Because our Zoom meetings sometimes go maybe 2.5 hours, sometimes 3 hours. So instead of putting a whole 3 hours on the YouTube channel, I'm trying to divide it up to make it maybe a little bit easier. And I'm indexing. That way you can go specifically to a certain part and then go to a specific topic if there was something specifically you wanted to look at. Just trying to make things a little bit easier for believers if they want to go back and review the old Zoom meetings.
Brother Lukeman, I had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So in our Sunday meeting today, the minister talked about, well, he didn't talk about it, but he mentioned that there is oh, I guess the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did a talk about how the moon was shot off the earth.
Okay.
Happen to know that lecture?
I'm not, I mean, I've heard the topic, but I have not heard the minister teach it. I've heard Sister Ava speak on it.
Right. Hmm.
The deportation of the moon.
Yes, the deportation of the moon.
Okay.
I, I bring that up because right before the earthquake, there was a lot of talk, not the earthquake, the solar eclipse. And there's a lot of talk about, the moon and this. And one day I think I was leaving my mother's house, and it was either Saturday or Sunday night. And on NPR um there was a little not a little segment, but I think it was about 30 minutes to an hour where they talked about how the moon was shut out to Earth.
Mm.
And I caught maybe the last 15, it might have been an hour, but I think it was a 30-minute, no, I think it was an hour, and I caught the last 15 to 30 minutes of it. And they were talking about how the moon's surface is not anything like the Earth, and that I'm just paraphrasing, that it could be extremely cold, below, like just below, way like 200 degrees below freezing, or it could be extremely hot. It has one atmosphere. It was just talking, and then it said that the ground was like shard, like shrapnel, like it was really spiky. So I wanted to hear about the deportation of the moon and see how much they were kind of bearing witness to it to an extent.
Oh, I mean, when you go and hear how they explain it now, they bear witness that the moon was once a part of the earth. I mean, they bear witness to that. And I know you're familiar with when they brought the rocks back, that the rocks smelled like gunpowder. You've heard that before?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The best story I've heard about the moon was the one that Sister Ava has done, and that is on the YouTube. The way she explained it was that when you have what's called the Canary Islands, I think the Canary Islands are off the west coast of Africa. The Canary Islands represents the mountaintops of what used to be considered Atlantis. I think that's how she explained it. How Atlantis used to be a landmass between North America and Africa. Thus, you get what's called the Atlantic Ocean. But her that lecture is actually very interesting. I think it's about maybe 2 hours long. Okay. Sister Tina. And she's coming in. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Tina.
All right. Wa alaikum salam, Brother Lukman. How you doing?
Doing fine, and yourself?
I'm doing wonderful. All praises due to Allah from Lakem family.
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam, ma'am.
Okay, Sister, wait, give me 1 second. Just gotta plug in here. Sister Tina, any good information, some good wins, some good cognition, anything you want to share before we get started?
Yeah, it is something, but I said, you know what? Sometimes as soon as you share something, Allah will put it on you. Whatever you share, He'll make you eat your words, in other words. That ever happened to you or anybody?
Yes, ma'am. Every time I go to, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, every time you what?
I said, every time I go to work and I say I'm going to fast, one of the guys will bring in something that their wife made, like a cake or a tray of cookies, or every time I say I'm going to fast, there's always some sweets. Because sweets, that's my test.
Praise be to Allah. Yes, sir. And I remember when the minister with the prostate cancer, if anyone remembers, I believe it was 1999, around the time he took his hiatus, if that's what you call it, when he took that time off.
Back in 99?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It was around that time. He told, if you remember, he spoke to the nation, and this was over the phone at that time. And he said that his cancer was because of us. Anybody remember that?
I vaguely remember that.
In words, yeah. It was because of us. us. And I think of that a lot because the minister shares all the time, all of himself. And if I get it back, if I go through stuff when I share, after I share, I can imagine what the minister goes through or what he has gone through. But anyway, I'm not going to be a what do you call that? Intellectual coward. And I'm going to share. I don't know if you remember when I was talking, I think this was during the mathematics, I was talking about the 5 daily prayers and each one being worth 10, it was told to us. So that's been really heavy on my mind. So in my study of the science of survival, it was talking about how the analytical mind, is made to compute, and compute means to be able to predict, to calculate. So I just, so I was thinking about the what if program, the what if factor in Excel, dealing with the spreadsheets. They have a what if formula. And you analyze, So I've been thinking, what if because we're not told anything for no reason. So what if that is pretty much a real warning to us, or a real cognition, a real what's the word? A real factor, and if we, so the 5 prayers being 10 each, if we make the 5 prayers, and but if we don't, we make 4, we make 3, we make 2, we make 1. That does not equal 50. 10 times 40 does not equal 50. So if Allah is going to let us know how we did when that time comes, and he says, no, you made 4, so that's 40. Or you made 1, that's 10. So Allah's most merciful. So what if he says, okay, if you make all 50 per day, you're good. So it just made me think about how much more, to me, burdensome 50 would be as opposed to 5. And I've been doing pretty good. But as soon as I related that to a sister yesterday, and she was grateful, she asked me what I've been studying, what I've been learning. So I told her that. It came on me. I was trying to do the 3-day fast, and somehow I wasn't in present time, walking through my house, and bam, ran into the wall, and really, hit my head real hard. But I started massaging it counterclockwise, and it was okay. I got, a knot didn't come up, and the pain went away, and all that good stuff. But anyway, it just discouraged me from continuing my fast. I broke my fast last night and ate, and I got 2 days in. Good, praise be to Allah. And I didn't make my 5th prayer last night, and I didn't make my Fajr prayer this morning. So I said, dang. I said, no sooner, but just shows me how much harder I have to work. I'm not beating myself up. It's just that I'm finding ways to encourage myself and inspire myself and motivate myself to be more obedient. So that's a good thing. It's not, it's a really good thing. So yes, sir.
I look at every day as another day that Allah blesses us to get it right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I've been thinking about, we self-examine, self-analysis, self-correction. So examine is when we examine to find out what's wrong. Then analysis is when we find out how to correct what's wrong?
Okay.
Is that analysis?
It could be. You're analyzing, you're breaking everything down into components.
Okay. All right. Breaking it down into components so that you can correct it accordingly. Okay. Yes, sir. So that's what I'm doing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Self-examination in the language of the tech, they call it confronting, the ability to confront.
Okay. All
That's
right. And what is
the root of every problem is our inability to confront.
okay.
Okay. One of the things that L. Ron Hubbard said, and I keep the quote close at hand, he says, aging is the inability to confront motion.
Hmm.
That's why we got to do a little exercise every day.
Yes, sir. So what is analysis in the tech? That may be a crazy question because we have self-analysis from the tech, but I'm just looking for something simple.
Maybe processing.
Okay. Yeah.
You could look at processing as analyzing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All righty. Let's get started. Let's see. Pause my computer for just a second. Some of this information we have covered before, and some of this information presented is going to be new information. We're going to look at the tone of speech. We're going to specifically look at something called the communication formula. Has everyone heard of that, or is there anyone that has not heard of the communication formula?
I've never heard of it.
Okay. So we're going to present the communication formula, and we're also going to parallel it with an interview that the minister has done. So we're going to use the minister as an example of a communication cycle. Okay. I think I'm going to start including this in all of the videos. And on the day when we raise up in every people a witness against them from among themselves, and bring thee as a witness against thee, and we have revealed the book, the explaining all things, and the guidance and mercy and good news for those who submit. We're going to take aspects of the tone scale and show how they correlate, or how we can find equivalents to ayats of the Holy Quran. Okay. As always, we're marrying the supreme wisdom with the supreme technology. So here's the first thought. First thought is this: if Allah is the best speaker, and he speaks in the language of formulae, how can we receive a better understanding of the mathematics behind his communication? Okay. In other words, the minister is the one who said that Allah is a scientist who speaks in the language of formulae, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But now the minister has said it. The minister can prove it. Can we prove it? In other words, we can't get by on the minister's belief, because in his absence, who are the ones that have to be able to show and prove the teachings in his absence? That has to be us, correct?
Yes, sir.
So what we want to do is we want to start with, and I know I said if Allah is the best speaker, but we already know that that's true, correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. And we know he speaks some language of formulae, but how can we get a better understanding of what that actually means? Okay. Yes. Now, if the Holy Quran is a book explaining all things, is the communication formula contained within? Okay. How can we marry the supreme wisdom with the supreme technology? By studying the communication formula through the example of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. In the text, you have something called tone 40, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and tone 40, with regards to communication, represents the ability to maintain a high level of tone in the presence of someone who may not have a high level of tone. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have received that in the example of the day might come when someone will spit in your face and you'll have to be able to take that, correct?
Yes, sir.
That is akin to maintaining a tone 40 in the presence of someone who might be aberrated. I don't know if I'm there yet, but we will see. So a brief overview. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Ania. Saw you just come in. You're on mute if you can talk. Okay. So what is communication? What are the elements of communication? And what is the cycle of communication? What is communication with respect to tone level? Okay. So we're starting out with a quote coming from Closing the Gap, actually. Brother Jabril Muhammad says, my question is 2 or 3 questions in one. How would you define the art of conversation? And then how would you define the best kind of conversation Muslims should be engaging in, especially in this critical hour as it is getting darker? The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan responds by saying, Allah gives to every creature the ability to communicate with its own, to be able to share with other members of its species what its aim is, what its desire is, and the fulfillment of the natural inclination of the species. The highest manifestation of communication is language that he gives to the human to express its desires, its concerns, its needs, its disappointments, its frustrations, but all of it is manifested through language. Now, does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. He says, the art of communication is a lost art among human beings. I guess the Tower of Babel and the confusion of language is demonstrative of the chastisement of God and disallowing human beings to be able to communicate at the highest level. Now, when he says this, if the Tower of Babel represents confusion of language, and it represents disallowing human beings to be able to communicate at the highest level, could that be a part of the time period that we've been in over the past 6,000 years, where we have not been able to communicate at the highest levels because we've been stuck in this vacuum that's been controlled by the devil 6,000 years? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is it possible now that we're coming into a time period where we are now being allowed to communicate on the higher levels? So with us as a people that were taken from our original language and culture, we have developed skill in communicating through various means, sometimes other than language. But the highest form of communication is language that is used to communicate the wisdom of God. That's Closing the Gap, page 318 to page 319. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add before we go forward? Okay. Sister Ania, can you hear us yet? Communication. What makes the interview such a powerful vehicle for learning and communication is that in a direct manner, an individual is placed in a position of being presented with concepts, ideas, and arguments of varying intelligence and emotional content, and given an opportunity to express what they think and how they feel about what has been placed before them. Another critical aspect of the interview process is that an individual has the opportunity to speak about their view of themselves in relation to persons, ideas, institutions, and events. But what kind of interview yields the most information and learning and produces the greatest impact on others? It is that interview and where the interview subject is the most candid in answering the most informed, important, and consequential questions, while speaking deeply into that which is of the greatest consequence, motivated by love, the deepest respect for the truth, and concern for what is most appropriate for those who are listening. That's from Closing the Gap, and that's from the introduction on page Roman numeral 12. Any thoughts, questions before we go forward? All right. So one who is best in communication or speech takes into consideration various elements and outcomes. So when an individual is speaking, and I have an example here of the minister speaking, a skillful orator is not just talking for the sake of talking. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. A skillful orator, number one, has to be in communication with Allah. There's a verse in the Bible, and this is one of the foundational verses I would stand on with regards to when I was teaching in the prisons as a chaplain. And that is, when you stand before men, don't worry about what you will say. Just stand up in my name, and I will put my words in your mouth. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So for us, sometimes it's just having the courage to stand up in the name of God and then allow God to speak through us. Okay. When you look at the minister speaking, he's speaking on multiple levels. And that's why many people can leave hearing the minister and they feel as though he has spoken directly to them, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, and Sister Peggy, if you would just remind me at the very end about what you put in the chat, if you would be able to speak briefly on it, but of course you can have the floor to do a presentation anytime you choose. You hear me, Sister Peggy?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And I will.
Yeah, I would definitely look forward to that. Okay, so I'm gonna take excerpts from what we just read from Closing the Gap. And then as you're listening to the minister's words, see how the corresponding elements taken from Closing the Gap line up exactly with how the minister handles this media personality. So first, you're placed in a position of being presented with concepts, ideas, and arguments of varying intelligence. Has the minister displayed the ability to handle many concepts, ideas, and arguments with people from different intelligences and from different backgrounds? Has he shown that he can do that?
Yes.
Okay. Given an opportunity to express what he thinks. Well, the minister has been given the opportunity to express what he thinks by Allah. Answering the most informed, important, and consequential questions while speaking deeply into the subject. Has the minister showed the ability to do that?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. Motivated by love, the deepest respect for truth, and what is most appropriate for all that are listening. Has the minister accomplished that on thousands of occasions?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we know his words are motivated by love, by the deepest respect, not only for Allah himself and those he's speaking to, and what is most appropriate for all that are listening. So he covers all these elements while he's communicating to us, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So he covers all aspects of the cycle of communication, and we're going to get into the cycle now. So you won't, if you've never seen the cycle, you won't be able to compare it to what he's saying. But when we get to that point, we'll be able to kind of cross-reference it. Have you ever heard the minister say that he doesn't listen to what a person says, he listens to their intention?
I heard something to that effect.
What did you hear?
When he was speaking about the Jewish guy at his dinner table, and he asked him a question, and Allah gave him the answer to the question according to the other person's motivation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Gave him the motivation, something to that effect.
Okay. So I'm gonna play this small clip. Many of you, if not all of you, have probably already seen this clip, but as you're listening to the clip, just keep in mind all these elements and factors that we just covered to see how the minister uses skill and tact and intelligence to take what someone had intended for one thing and then reversed it and used it against them. Okay.
Let me quote your own website here. There's a passage that says, "We believe
that Allah, parentheses God, appeared in the person of Master W. Fard Muhammad, July 1930, the long-awaited Messiah of the Christians and the Mahdi of the Muslims." Now, I think that would be controversial among the mainstream Muslims. Could you understand or clarify these statements that God appeared in the person of Fard in Detroit?
With all due respect to you from the Washington Times, you are certainly no authority on what would create confusion among mainstream Muslims. And of course, I understand your motive for raising such question, but I will answer you very succinctly in a way that I believe all Muslims would understand. First of all, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, said to all of us in his hadith that the Mahdi would come out of his family, and the whole Muslim world is expecting Mahdi, number one. The Muslim world also is expecting the return of Jesus coming with Mahdi. And the third point is the Shiite Muslims are looking for the hidden Imam or the 12th Imam, which is called Imam Mahdi. And they thought that Ayatollah Khomeini was that Imam, but from his own lips, he said he was not Mahdi. Now, why does the Muslim Ummah need a Mahdi? The Mahdi is a guide. And you don't need a guide if you have not lost your way. And no one can deny that the Islamic world has lost the path of Allah that they were guided to from the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He said 3 generations after him would no longer be of him, which meant that he knew that his ummah would go astray, and therefore the Mahdi was prophesied to come. We believe that the Mahdi has come, and that he came in the person of W. Farad Muhammad. And why do we say Allah? Because if you look at the attributes of Allah, starting with mercy, beneficence, starting with Malik, a judge, or Rabbil Alameen, one who nurtures something from one stage and makes it attain stage after stage until it reaches perfection. He's Wali, the protecting friend. He's Jabbar. He's all of this. Well, you tell me, who visited us since I came up in America that most of you are afraid of? But I have no fear of that is the power in the world who protects me. You don't, they don't. but I come and go as I please because Allah is with me. He came to us. His beneficence and his mercy raised me. I never was taught in Al-Azhar, nor in any school of theology in the Islamic world. But if you listen to me, you will know that I have been taught by a master, because no master over here has defeated and can defeat what I have been taught of a master. I am here to awaken a world that has gone to sleep. If you listen to me and hear what I say, you will awaken to your responsibility and come back to Allah. Thank you for your question. I know you didn't intend it for good, but God brought good out of it anyway.
Now, was that skillful or what?
Yes, sir. Mm.
So the minister hit every point that you see on the left, correct?
Mhm.
He presented the concept, ideas, and arguments of varying intelligences. He explained it from the perspective of various schools of thought within the Islamic community, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. He spoke deeply into the subject. He was motivated by love, the deepest respect for the truth, and what was most appropriate for all that are listening. That was a mercy. That was a little spank on the bottom for the press to even who asked that question. The minister was really even merciful to him, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any thoughts before we go forward? Okay. The cycle of communication. Communication is the interchange of ideas or particles between 2 points. This is the definition that actually comes from Scientology. So we're looking at ideas or particles. Remember, L. Ron Hubbard was one of the fields of his study was nuclear physics, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So for me, at least, when I see this definition, communication is interchange of ideas or particles between 2 points. So when we're talking about ideas, we're talking about between people, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When we're talking about particles, we're talking about science. Now we're getting into nuclear physics. Brother Jabril in Self First, I believe it's in part 1, he speaks briefly about quantum physics. He talks about the 4 forces in the universe. Has anyone heard that lecture before? Self First?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you get in quantum physics, you have what's called the strong force, you have the weak force, then you have the electromotive force, and then you have the force of gravity. And based on what the theory is in modern times, you have the strong force is what keeps the protons and the neutrons together in the nucleus. The weak force is what keeps the electrons connected to the nucleus. And then you have gravity, which takes place between planets and objects on the Earth. And then you have what's called the electromotive force, which is dealing with light. Does that make sense? Okay. And each one of those forces have what's called force molecules. So in between so it's like one of the best ways to express this as a demo is, you know how when you're trying to sew 2 pieces of fabric together, or for brother doctor, when you're suturing, you're taking a thread from one point to another in order to hold 2 points together. Yes? Does everyone follow that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you have that thread that's going back and forth that's holding 2 things together. So when you're dealing with the strong force, the theory is that there is a particle that is going back and forth between the proton and the neutron, keeping those particles glued in the nucleus. Okay, does that kind of make sense? When you're dealing with the weak force, you have, they call them W bosons and I believe Z bosons. These are particles that are going back and forth that are keeping the atoms together. For Brother Doctor, I know your background in organic chemistry is intense. Is it safe to assume that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that organic chem. So in the organic chemistry, when we deal with organic chem, you're dealing with bond length, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then gravity, the theory is that there's particles called gravitons. And that's what's holding us on the planet, everything on the planet, as the planet is rotating and traveling through space. And when you deal with the strong force, those are actually called gluons. Okay. And light, obviously, those are called photons. Sister Peggy would know about photons because she's on the Starship Enterprise, correct? Okay. So there's particles on an atomic level that are communicating between particles. And it's the same concept as individuals communicating to individuals, correct? Everyone follow that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It, by you explaining what you just explained, which I don't, I hear you, but to really understand it, I don't, because I don't know that language. But what came to my mind, and you can let me know if am I grasping it a little bit. What came to my mind as far as communication goes between people, and then the explanation of the particles, it's like in our lessons, have you not learned that your word shall be bond, regardless of whom or what? And so when that word is broken, that bond is broken. So when you mentioned the word bond, that's what came to my mind.
No, that's perfect.
So that's how I'm understanding what you said. Okay.
Because when you get into chemistry,
praise be to Allah.
When you get into chemistry, there's actually 3 types of bonds. And 3 types of bonds, you could say, represent 3 types of relationships. This is how I remembered it when I was in school and I was in organic chemistry. It was at the same time that I was a unveiling the number 19 addict, if that makes any sense. As soon as I got my Final Call newspaper, it was unveiling the number 19, Farrakhan the Traveler, and Brother Abdullah had 1155. Remember 1155?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it was really hearing the minister's lectures, listening to Sister Ava, because that was during the time of Mind Wars, back in the early 80s, late 90s, and unveiling the number 19. And I used that information to help me understand organic chemistry. So in chemistry, you have what's called ionic bonds, which are very, very weak, and they're not real bonds. It's just one atom is so strong, it takes an electron from the weaker one, and the weaker one just stays around trying to get back what that electron that belongs to it. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
In other words, it's like in our past, we're involved in relationships that weren't real relationships. They were just relationships where one person was taking from and the other person was giving, and it was more to satisfy a need that we stayed in that relationship, correct?
Okay, yes, sir.
Okay. And that was the type of person you had to keep your eye on. Does that make sense? That's how I remember it. Ionic bond, right?
Okay, yes, sir.
Okay. Then you have what's called a polar covalent bond, where you have 2 particles. They both give and take, but one gives a little bit more than the other. And that bond is stronger than the ionic bond, because the ionic bond is not real. Then you have what's called the covalent bond, where these two are so strong, you don't see one without the other. That's the strongest bond. So you know, can you see how these represent three types of relationships?
Yes, sir.
You have a marriage that's very, very strong, and it takes a lot of power to break a bond. They have some relationships, you know, I think all of us in our past have experienced those where it's just like, you know, it was just, we had particular reasons why we got involved in the relationships. But that is how I remembered my chemistry and through bonds. But Sister Tina, as we're saying it, you're picturing this in your mind. That's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about bonds, and it comes down to communication, right?
Yes, sir.
In the relationship,
Okay.
if there's no
Praise be to the
communication, what
Lord.
happens?
A bond is broken, you
Right?
know.
Mhm. Remember ARC. If there's no communication,
Yes.
then eventually
Yes, sir.
there's not gonna be any affinity. There's no closeness. And if there's no communication, there's no affinity, then there's not gonna be any reality or agreement.
Reality.
And then
So that's the ARC break. When
that's
that
the,
happens, that's called it.
that's the ARC break. So you can take that and apply it to a relationship. If there's no agreement in the relationship, then eventually there's not gonna be any communication and there's not gonna be any affinity. So one of those things missing will cause the other two to be dismissed, and then that relationship is going to go by the wayside. So in order to reintroduce that relationship, you have to find at least one of those things to reintroduce in order to get the other two back up and running. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the communication, the cycle, the definition for communication, I'll explain this, is there's cause, there's distance, there's effect with intention and attention, and a duplication at effect of what emanates from cause. Now, let me explain that. So as the speaker in the Zoom meeting, as I'm speaking as the source point, the words are traveling a distance from me to you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then you are the effect, or also what's called the receipt point. But as I'm communicating, I'm communicating to get your attention, and the communication I'm sharing, I have an intention. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the Zoom meeting and all the recipients have my attention, but I also have an intention. And where it says a duplication at effect from what emanates from cause, as I'm speaking and you say, yes, sir, that is a duplication, meaning you're acknowledging that the communication has been received, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So being that I can't see everyone, then I'll say, does that make sense, or do you follow? And then by your response, I say, okay, well, at least one person is duplicating. In the mosque setting, where you can see all the people you're speaking to, you can look at individuals' faces as you're speaking, and you can see that the communication is being duplicated, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then in the mosque, we say that's right, or go ahead and teach, and now we know that at least half that cycle is taken care of. So the component parts of the communication are this. First, I got to make a consideration. I got to think about something, correct?
Yes, sir.
It's really saying the same thing, but there's more detail in this one. So I have attention and I have intention. Okay. So as I'm speaking to you, there's an intention behind what I'm saying. Okay. I have an intention. My intention is to marry the supreme wisdom with the supreme tech. My intention is to take the minister's words and follow his instructions and make his words real by studying the tech given by L. Ron Hubbard and placing it and bringing it back home in our language. Okay, that's my intention, and for that, I get your that's my attention as cause and source point. It travels the distance, you duplicate it. And then it says the velocity of the impulse or particle, I'm either going to get a nothingness or a somethingness, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that means is this. If have you ever talk to someone and you got no response from them?
Yes, sir.
How does that make you feel?
Like they're not listening.
Like they're not listening, right? And it's kind of aggravating, right?
Yes, sir.
So you got a nothing,
Yes, sir.
okay? Have you ever heard where I think it was the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that when a person is not listening, it kind of takes it kind of, and I'm just paraphrasing, I can't remember the exact quote, but if individuals aren't listening, it takes away from your desire to teach.
Yes, sir.
You've heard that before? Okay.
Yes, sir. It was in the study guides not too long ago.
Okay.
We read that.
Okay. In the study guides. So you have the communication
Mm-hmm.
and you're looking for duplication. Okay. That is only one half of the cycle. Okay. So now the full cycle of communication, two-way communication is sometimes, like, for example, Sister Tina might say, Brother Luke, I have a question. What have you done now? Now you have become the source point. You have attention, and then you have intention. You have said something across the distance, and now I'm the effect or the receipt point. And now I duplicate it by saying, oh, yes, Sister Tina, I got that question. Here's how I would answer it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's the two-way communication.
Yes, sir. And I want to make a correction. It's either the study guide or closing the gap.
Okay.
So yes,
Okay.
sir.
No. Okay, thank you. So now a non-communication consists of barriers, meaning, well, let me read the whole quote first. Barriers consist of space, interpositions, such as walls and screens of fast-moving particles and time. This is from a book called Dianetics 55, page 60. Now, how do we translate this into our language? So if I say something and you don't understand what I'm talking about, that becomes a non-communication. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. In our language, we
Yes,
could say
sir.
that represents baby language. Okay. If I was to sit here and talk to everyone about calculus and differential equations and all that crazy stuff, I would see people just start dropping off from the Zoom meeting, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Unless I can take those concepts and, like the minister does, rephrase those concepts in a way that everyone can understand what's being spoken about, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So if I was to sit here and start talking to Brother Wadud about bond length and organic chemistry and isomers, he would understand what I'm saying, but the rest of you might question my intention, correct? Maybe.
Yes, sir.
You know how some people just like to talk to hear themselves speak?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Well, just for all intents and purposes, I'm not that type of person. Me personally, I don't talk just to hear myself speak. I like to hear your cognitions and your postulates and I listen for voice inflection. I like to hear your tone levels go up. So that's my intention. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So barriers could represent things that we just don't understand. Okay.
Mm.
And if I'm communicating, and which is why I always say, please ask the questions, because I don't like going forward if there's any misunderstoods, because what happens is halfway through, those non-communications will accumulate, correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Non-communication will accumulate in a fine mist that they can hardly detect, and then it distills back in the form of misunderstanding or no understanding.
Mhm.
Okay. So communication and tone level. Sister Tina, you're in science of survival. You might be able to appreciate this more so than those that have not touched on science of survival. But I found something by Allah's grace that I thought was very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Who here has read or is reading Science of Survival? Other than Sister Tina. Okay. Who here plans on reading Science of Survival? Nobody.
Not in the near future.
Okay. Well, this is something that you'll find interesting regardless, I think. I know when I was going through, I was reading through something, and then, you know, Surah 96, Ikra, read in the name of your Lord who creates, who taught man by the pen and taught man what he knows not. Read, and thy Lord is most generous, who taught man by the pen what man knew not, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So that's why I say that, because I don't take credit for what I share. But there's some things that I was blessed to see, and as soon as I get it, I'm like, I gotta share this with the believers. Who is that from Seed that I saw show up? Is that Brother Scott or Sister Erica? Did I see Seed Incorporated pop up?
There it is. Oh, we went back. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. How you doing, Brother Scott?
Man, handling big business over here, bro. I'm gonna
I
be
see
honest.
that. I see the results of that fruit fast, brother.
Praises be to Allah. Yeah, we did 6 days on the side of that.
6 days of fruit, huh?
No. We did the 4.
Oh, just lost you there, Brother Scott.
My back.
Yeah, I hear you. What we saying?
I said after the 7 days of fruits and vegetables, we did 3 days with just water, coffee, and ate Thursday, and then we did the national fast. So
Okay.
I got walking because what I'm doing ain't really civilized, y'all. It just I'm lucky I'm using the spoon tonight. You know what I mean?
To Allah. That's inspiring. I gotta get back on my. I've been doing more fruit than normal, but gotta just stay on it. Gotta break this. I gotta break this sugar addiction. Anyway.
Yes, sir. And you know what, Brother Lukman?
Yes, sir.
It's like since we got back from Flag,
Uh-huh.
that was the last like sweet stuff I did. You know,
Really?
like I don't have a desire for anything sweet. And nothing in the package. I went to the store this morning. Everything I brought was a whole food, either a fruit or a vegetable. And that's how I've been cooking, like on our 3 nice vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody in the group that we're fasting with, the sisters, each lost, one lost, I think, 14 pounds, one lost 15.
Oh,
One
wow.
of the brothers lost 26 pounds.
Who
You
lost
heard me?
26 pounds?
Well, you know, I don't want to say
No. I mean, don't give me the name, but I mean, just by
yeah,
26
brother.
pounds?
So you take the CKLS with it, and
Yes.
you drink a lot of water, and it's flushing. You know, before I went to Flag, I had got up to the biggest I ever been in my life, and I was tripping out because I was looking in the mirror and said, "Man, you a fat Muslim." And you got fat after the teachings. And Brother Jabril say that's something to do with hypocrisy.
Uh-huh.
How you gonna get fat afterwards? Now I've been in 30 years, but still. So, you know, I'm now back down to a weight that's just what I would consider overweight.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sliding down towards my goal. So my goal is, you know, my ideal weight, my high school weight is between 175 and 180. So I had about 20 pounds to go. 15. So
oh, boy, let me see if I can catch up with you.
And no bread. We ain't eating no bread. Bread ain't for fat people. You know, the bread is for slender people. But fat people don't have no business with bread or a starchy potato. Talk about just eating French fries or something like that. Nope. it's time to go to war with obesity, because in a few days we're gonna have to eat one meal every other day,
You ain't lying.
every 3 days, and let the children eat once.
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
You're right, brother.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you. So tone 40. Get this out of the way here. So the highest level of the scale contains the faculty of communicating completely and withholding nothing. Also, the ability to communicate with complete rational selectivity. Also, the ability